Good evening, friends and brethren. Welcome to the presentation number 27 of the Prophecy Insights series, 144,000, the main heading, and the Israel of God sealed, that is fifth presentation. And the title for tonight's Bible study is Moses' Prophetic Blessings on the 12 Tribes of Israel. As Moses' role ends, and they are ready to cross over Jordan River and set their foot on promised land proper. So before he sends over the 12 tribes, the children of Israel, which he led them, by the way, all the way from Egypt, and his role ends, and Joshua takes over. In fact, he takes some of his spirit and gives it over to Joshua so that Joshua can lead uh, this great nation of God, which have great covenant relationship with God. And Moses and Aaron, when Moses strikes the rock twice, God said, "You and your brother Aaron are not going to make it into promised land." It seems to be simple act of disobedience that ends the career of both the individuals, main individuals. But God gives an interesting reason. The reason being from God that you failed to honor me in the eyes of children of God, children of Israel. They failed to honor God or glorify God in the eyes of children of Israel. It's a dire warning for every teacher, every leader, every pastor, minister, deacon, elder. If you fail to honor God or glorify God in the eyes of the audience, you're not going to make it into kingdom of God. And that's how very tragically Moses' role ends. And I'm almost like, if you carefully read the whole story of Israel this far in Deuteronomy 33, 34, I think nobody can stop shedding few tears for this man of God, this great man of God, Moses, that such a tragedy strikes him. God shows him the land from afar off on the top of a mountain, some portion of the promised land for his comfort and consolation. But his role ends. Also, he has become old, and a new leadership under Joshua, they cross over and possess the land. Let's start the presentation, how Moses blesses the 12 tribes before he says goodbye to them. Plan for today. The Israel of God, we discussed the potter and clay. God remade the house in the realm of spirit because the first house was marred in potter's hands. And God remakes, newly creates again the second house in the realm of spirit, that is, track two Christians from clay. So this is also called Israel. And interestingly, God uses names, continues to use the same names in the second house when he remakes again, because he remakes again, taking the template of the first house. The template, the first house becomes shadow, and the second house becomes the very spiritual reality and very image. And the first house is Israel after flesh, and Jacob and 12 sons. The structure and features of the old house. Jacob, he wrestled with God, and then Jacob prevails against pre-incarnate Word of God, and he wrestles and prevails. And interestingly, God comes back and refers back to that event and tells us that God actually prevailed over Jacob. And and he gives the new name to Jacob called Israel. The Israel means God prevailed. God prevailed. God is able to change Jacob through the wrestling, and he was successful in wrestling, and God was successful, and Jacob was successful. It's a win-win for both because God accomplished something out of Jacob. We went through the whole story of Jacob, and God was progressively removing guile from his mouth and and malice and wickedness from his heart. God goes to elaborate lengths, and this man stole the birthright from his brother Esau, but he has to go through so many deceptions and so many disappointments, and he becomes a man of sorrow. The deception, he becomes a victim of deception after deception. His own would deceive him even unto the last end of the days of this person. It's a series of failures, series of being victimized through the deception. I think he paid dearly. But when he wrestled with God all through, not only the event when he wrestled, but the whole experience of his life walking with God, he won, and God actually won. God won to eliminate the guile from his mouth and also the malice and wickedness from his heart. So, this is a great picture and great story of how God prevailed with the one man from whom we have 12 sons. We went through 12 sons. The 12 sons are fathered by one man called Jacob, whose name was changed to Israel. So you have 12 sons. In again, they fathered several children, great grandchildren, great 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 grandchildren. Many generations pass by. We have large groups or large families, 12 families, and we call them tribes. Tribes are actually large families, including many, many grandchildren. So we have Jacob fathered 12 sons, and 12 sons fathered 12 groups or 12 tribes. So this is the basic structure of Israel. And then Jacob, before he dies, he has prophetic sayings regarding his sons. We went through that in the previous presentation. So we are moving fast forward after Jacob, and we have 70 people come to Egypt, and then they meet Joseph, and finally the one good family, happy family, and then fast forward, they become enslaved by a new Pharaoh who did not know Joseph, and they were enslaved. In spite of that, God blessed them and multiplied them, and they were very fruitful, and they rapidly multiplied into a huge uh, 2 to 3 million at least, maybe more than that. So there's a large group, and then they cry out to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And then God responds and sends Moses. He selects Moses and sends over as the deliverer. Even though God was behind the scenes, the actual deliverer, his mouthpiece and his agencies that would be observed in the realm of flesh. He goes and confronts Pharaoh face to face, and with 10 plagues, finally, Pharaoh would let go. And then they go and cross the Red Sea, and they come to Mount Sinai, and they enter into covenant with God. They become covenanted people, and God becomes their covenanted God. And we begin to see God applies that covenant formula. That is very important. Covenant formula. Covenant formula has three rules. God says, like, you are my people. And that is the first rule. Second is, I am your God. That is second rule. And the third is, I will dwell among you. So these are the three essential features when God makes a covenant. So all the three are required, and God begins to dwell with them. Previously, he was on Mount Sinai, and now he comes and becomes like appears to them as a pillar of cloud and pillar of fire, and he positions himself on the tabernacle. So the tabernacle is placed in the middle of the camp. So now they would start immediately after the Sinai covenant. God gives instructions how they camp around the tabernacle, because God dwelling with his people. So we last time we discussed the layout of marching Israel and how they have to camp. We have number of ribbons around tabernacle, and finally we see the grand picture of God and his wife together, and Holy Spirit shows to Balaam prophet uh, how it is like this. He makes a beautiful statement. Me and my wife dwelling in everlasting gardens and mountains and the valleys. And the beautiful description actually takes us back to Garden of Eden, where Adam and Eve, before their fall, enjoyed this beautiful relationship with God. So there's a great restoration being revealed even in the shadow as the layout of marching Israel. Layout is when they camp, when they are moving. I believe they are like a caravan. Judah leading, Judah looking to the pillar of cloud and pillar of fire, and the whole caravan, all the tribes would follow. And once the pillar of cloud stops moving, and that is the time when they realize this is the time to stop and lay the camp out exactly as per the instructions. So they will blow the silver trumpets, and the whole camp comes to a halt, and the Levites would help the leaders of the 12 tribes to arrange themselves east, west, north, south. So the layout we have seen. So they are beginning this wilderness journey. Forward, they go through wilderness 40 years. The wilderness journey itself is a huge, incredible uh, portion of the history of Israel. It's basically a training ground. They were in Egypt. There were no people. They were not segregated tribal wise, but now they are moving as 12 divisions, 12 tribes divided into four camps, four sub camps. So you have a massive army of people moving or staying temporarily in the form of a camp. So 40 years is a great training period. It is also a testing period. Oftentimes they are tested when the waters were bitter and there's no water, and they cry out. So they have to begin to trust God. And they came out of slavery, so they're now beginning to enjoy the freedom. But with freedom requires certain responsibilities. So that is perhaps being trained. And the major lessons they learned is this is all wilderness. They are in wilderness, and everything else is poisonous that they can pick up. Nothing they can pick up, and everything is poisonous. Only food that is provided to them is manna. So they have to eat manna. Their manna falls uh, during the early hours in the morning, and once the sun rises, they will go and collect manna. That's a raw food. They cannot eat manna like that. They grind it, bake it, makes into cakes or pancakes. There are different edible forms. They will they will produce those edible forms from the raw manna and they will consume. And every day they are granted a portion, which is good only for that day. And every day, next day, they have to collect. But on Friday, on the sixth day, they will get double portion. So that seventh day, no manna comes. So they were trained about Sabbath. They were trained on exclusively manna, nothing else. No other food is permitted, and there is no water. Water is permitted in multiple fashions and ways, primarily from the rock. When the rock is spoken to or hit only once, the water gushes out. So you have different lessons for their essentials for their livelihood. They have to depend on the water from God and food, that is manna from God, and then they have to rely on God every day for 40 long years. And uh, and finally they come back to the place where they started. I believe they went in circles. And sometimes they come close to civilization and they're allowed to buy some food and some water. But mostly the journey is in the wilderness. So their clothes did not wear out, their sandals did not wear out, and their bodies did not stink, and their animals and themselves are perfect. It's a miracle of God. It's a non-stop miracle for 40 long years. And we almost see a new generation of people because many of them rebelled again, except Joshua and Caleb. So all the first people which are old enough to sin, they all perished in the wilderness. So there are consequences for being unfaithful or rebellion against God. So those are lessons we can talk go on the lessons. And finally, Moses and Aaron, Moses being in the rulership position, is like a visible king. God is invisible king, and Moses was visible king, and the high priest is Aaron. Both of them were disqualified to enter into promised land. They come to the brinks of the promised land and now they are ready to take over the journey and under Joshua's leadership. So there's a river, Jordan, is at flooding stage. It's a swift flowing river, and now it is at the flood stage. And the water is so swift and so fierce. People can't swim, can't cross, and it is dangerous even to go there. And God chooses such a time. And as now, instead of Moses' staff that is stretched to open the Red Sea for them to cross over, you have priests. Now, priests are taking over the position of uh, the place of Moses, and then they would take the ark and the priests, 12 priests, and the six, I believe 12 plus Ark of the Covenant, they would move first, not Judah. God would go first because Ark represented presence of God. And when the first priest's feet touch waters of Jordan, the Jordan starts separating and the opening up the way. Even when it is at the flood level and the dry land is open and the whole Israel moves to the other side, and they were told to pick up 12 large boulders to represent 12 tribes as a memorial of what God did. And they cross Jordan and they land on the promised land. And now they have to the land, possess the land. So Moses, at this point, before they cross over into the promised land, he blesses the 12 tribes and say goodbye to them. And then shortly he goes to a mountain and then he dies. And Israelites were prevented from knowing the location of his body or place of his burial. And 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 Joshua takes over and they move and possess the land. Now they have to displace the the native people because their cup has come to full. All the Amorites are under wrath of God. Once their cup is full, uh, three portions for the fourth, when it is overflowing, the judgment is unleashed. Because when God promised Abraham that he will give this land, he said Amorite sins are not full. Their cup is not was not full when Abraham was given the original promise of inheritance. But his great 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 grandchildren, the 12 tribes, now would possess, and they will decimate. They were told to decimate as agencies of God's wrath. It is not their personal vengeance. It is under direct God's command, and God would otherwise also would have decimated the native people, Amorites. So Israel took the role of God's axe or God's shovel, whichever way you want to put. So they were acting in full obedience to God. But this is a picture of overcoming. They have two challenges once they enter into the promised land. They have to unlearn the ways of Egyptians from where they came out, and they have to protect themselves from learning the way of Amorites or Canaanites. So they have double challenge. One is to unlearn things, and the second is not to learn. So they have double challenge and they have to exterminate people. And God promises a large piece of land from Nile, the river of Egypt, to Euphrates. That's a huge piece of land. It is believed that they actually could drive away about 10%, one tenth of what God was originally planned to give them. So we have a story, and they finally conquer people, and then Joshua dies. He becomes an old man, and then everybody does what is right in their own eyes. So we see gradual degradation of the people once Joshua is left. Once up to Joshua, when he was alive, he was the leading agent of God, and he was stirring up people. He was providing right leadership and motivating and encouraging them. But once no more Joshua, then people were kind of sheep without shepherd. So that's where the degradation starts. And then you have at some point they wanted king, somebody like other nations. So they reject God, and God gives them uh, the first king of Israel, Saul, King Saul. The bad character. He was tall and handsome, but lacks wisdom, and God takes away his Holy Spirit from him. And then king comes King David, great king and great examples. In spite of grievous sins, he comes out shining as a true leader and true king of Israel. Under his leadership, Israel, all the 12 tribes, reach their peak in terms of prosperity, in terms of peace, and every way it is the peak. And then his son Solomon comes, and then he introduces all the pagan worship, and he marries 700 wives and 300 concubines from all over the countries, and he brings every religion into Israel, every idolatry and every paganism. So he sows the seeds for the destruction of Israel. And then finally, once he dies, his son takes over, and God divides the nation into two nations. Northern 10 tribes called Ephraim, come sometimes Samaria, and sometimes just Israel. Southern portion is Judah. It's called Judah, sometimes Judah, Levi, and any reminiscent of Benjamin, because Benjamin tribe was decimated, so very few residue of Benjamin and residue of Levi are still there with them. That is the southern kingdom. And northern kingdom also goes bad. And you have first and second Kings, first and second Samuel, first and second Chronicles. All these chapters cover the history of Israel under kings, different kings and different high priests. So you go through gradual degradation. You have mostly bad kings. Here and now, they have a great bright light in darkness, like King Hezekiah, King Josiah, and sometimes the evil king all his life, like Manasseh, repents at the last. And sometimes people are good, but at the end they go bad. And king always is mentioned with his mother. So there is something, the mother, how she trains and what king she produces. It's a great picture of mother and a king, her son. So we see that pattern uh, in these chapters, like First and Second Samuel, First and Second Kings, and First and Second Chronicles. While this is in progress, we see various warnings from God. He sends his prophets. We have major prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, and Daniel. And then we have minor prophets, all of them simultaneously prophesying about the impending judgments on Israel. And finally, when we come to Isaiah, uh, it is God is done. He brings a Syrian army and takes away the northern tribes, and he judges northern Israel. And then he brings up Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar and takes away and judges Judah. So that is end of Israel, and there is some reminiscent after Persian king Cyrus gives a command back to restore Jerusalem and rebuild the temple. So we have Nehemiah and Ezra go back and build the temple, second temple, but the temple was never really a functioning temple, and God's glory never returns to that temple. So it remains as a symbol, it remains as a memorial that once God dwelt there. So God actually leaves the temple when shortly before Nebuchadnezzar makes his third invasion, where they burn the temple and loot the temple and take away artifacts to Babylon. They could not have done that unless God's presence already left. So we see a couple of verses where God's presence left, and then we see the tragic end of the covenant formula. We see the covenant formula is, you are my people. That's what God tells them. And I am your God, and I dwell in the midst of you. All the three comes to a halt, a tragic end. So this is the a story in a sense. It is a tragedy. The story of Israel is a tragedy. It's for a reason. It's for a reason. First run is a tragedy, so that in the second run, people would learn, look at this, and they would not repeat the tragedy, or they themselves make such a foolish decisions and reap similar tragedy for them. So the whole story of Israel becomes a great textbook for us. So that's the brief thing. So before they cross Jordan, uh, here we see the Moses prophetic sayings about the 12 tribes. So that is tonight. And then I will briefly show the tribes of Israel again in the promised land, how they organized themselves. And then I will also talk about 12 gates of Jerusalem. So, Jerusalem was the place where God has put his name, and that's where the temple, tabernacle became temple. So, God was still in the midst of his people, Israel. So, God is dwelling with his people, and they are his people, and he is their God. So, the covenant formula with all the three rules were still in effect uh, when the 12 tribes settled in the promised land. So after this, I want to wrap up the Israel first house. I want to start very much from next presentation onwards, the second house, because this is endless. The first house is endless. The lessons, patterns, and the features and the structure. So when we discuss second house, we can revisit some of the things. So that's the thing. New Israel, who is the person equivalent to Jacob in shadow, and then features of the new house and structure of the new house. And we will, after that, we will have one session for innumerable great multitude, and then we will wrap up the series. One closing presentation. That's the thing. So Revelation 7, that's what we are uh, primary go-to verses. Revelation chapter 7, verse 4. And I heard the number of them which were sealed, and there were sealed 144,000 of all the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. So these are sealed. And of the tribe of Judah were sealed 12,000. So we have listing of these tribes. That's why we are studying these tribes. From Judah 12,000, Reuben and Gad and Asher and Naphtali and Manasseh were 12,000, and Simeon and Levi and Issachar, and then verse 8, Zebulun and Joseph were sealed 12,000. Joseph is name given to Ephraim. So that's why Ephraim is not separately mentioned here. And of the tribe of Benjamin, again 12,000. So that is 12,000 wherever the names occur. We are trying to gather the data, what these 12 names are. So the first house is a shadow, and second house is very image, the spiritual reality. The first house was flesh Israel, and the second house is spirit Israel, and the first house and second house. So this is the nomenclature, and this is a dynamic shadow. That means this is an animating. It's not just a statue. It's an animating person. So the shadow also animates. There's a movements, and it appears to have some life, but the life is only on the real object. It's all shadow. So have shown you a couple of presentations back at Dancing Girl, how the shadow also dances along with her. So there's an exact match between the shadow and reality. That's why we see the names and the patterns of them carried over from shadow to the reality. God, in his infinite wisdom, first builds shadow, and he keeps building the shadow with all the bells and whistles that he wanted to have. And then he does not give us a clue that he is building a shadow until we come to the New Testament scriptures. And then he tells us that what I built and shown to you was indeed a shadow. And now I am introducing a new house. This is the reality. So we will briefly go through Deuteronomy 33, where Moses says final goodbye, and before he says goodbye, he blesses the tribes. So this is important information about some of the tribes. Interesting thing is he only blesses 10 tribes. Joseph he mentions in terms of Ephraim and Manasseh, but primarily he blesses Joseph. So for some reason he drops Simeon, tribe of Simeon. And probably he compresses Ephraim and Manasseh into Joseph. That's why we have only 10 mentioned in this chapter, Deuteronomy 33. Let's see the story. And this is the blessing wherewith Moses, the man of God, blessed the children of Israel before his death. And he said, Lord, and the Lord came from Sinai. Here, from this verse 2 onwards, Moses is speaking. And he often refers to the Lord, and sometimes he refers to Lord as he or him. So we have to interpolate. And the Lord came from Sinai. That's where they entered the covenant about 40 years ago almost, uh, and rose up from Seir unto them, that is another mountain, and shined forth from the Mount Paran, and he came with 10,000 of saints. From his right hand went a fiery law for them. It's a strange language. People wondered how God came with thousands of saints. Nobody saw that when he landed on Mount Sinai. On the top of that, they only saw the fire and brilliance and the quaking sounds and the non-stop sound of trumpets. And it's like a storm, like weather. But Moses somehow prophesies 10,000s of saints. It's an expression. Large number of saints are also with him, and from his right hand went a fiery law from them. Right hand, what is in God's right hand is his law. Yeah, he loved the people. All his saints are in your hand. So, in God's hand are all his saints. It's almost pictures like first book of Revelation. And he said, like, I have seven stars in my right hand. And the seven stars are seven churches, are angels of seven churches. In his right hand, in Revelation, other chapters, you have a book, a little book in his hand, which is his law. So there are lots of things. And when he comes, second coming uh, of Christ, you have thousands of saints come with him. So sometimes it's confusing. Is it future or is it present? So I will let you make your own conclusions there. So I will just read that. Read these verses. Verse 3, yeah, he loved the people, and all his saints are in your hand, and they sat down at your feet. Everyone shall receive of your words. So people who are sitting at his feet, uh, at the footstool, everyone sitting on kind of floor, they will receive his words. Moses commanded us a law, even the inheritance of the congregation of Jacob. So, if Moses is saying that, why Moses is used? So, some people, some Bible teachers conclude that it is a third person writing because Moses is probably dead when these passages are written. So, either Joshua or somebody is writing afterwards. That's why they did not use first person, but they're using third person, Moses. And he was king in Jeshurun. Jeshurun is upright one. Jeshurun is another way God addresses Israel, especially in endearing or favorite terms. It's almost like a name for an ideal Israel, what God ideally looks Israel to be. He uses that Jeshurun. So Jeshurun is just applied for Israel, upright one, when the heads of the people and the tribes of Israel were gathered together. Here we see when Moses prophesies about each of the tribes, we see a shift in the pattern. Previously, every son of Jacob has specifics about each son. And we also see when the camp layout, we also see differences, different places for each of the tribe. And when Jacob dies and prophesies about each of the son, he has very specific different things for each of the sons. Here, Moses kind of looks at 12 tribes as a collective singular. So what he talks about one tribe loosely is applied to every tribe. He looks as one unit, even though there are 12 units. That's the background we begin to see. Perhaps God now begins to see no more as 12 different units, but there is one unit in his vision. That's why there is a shift. So let's continue. Verse 6. Let Reuben live and not die, because Reuben commits incest. And but here there's some grace of God is coming back to Reuben. Perhaps it is one person called Reuben did that incest, but his descendants are not punished or are not disfavored because of what Reuben did. So the tribe of Reuben continues to live and not die. So there is a grace of God you can see. And let not his men be few, even though Reuben committed incest, but God is generous. He's not visiting the iniquity of the fathers on children now in this case. And this is the blessing of Judah. So he shifts next to Judah. And he said, Hear, Lord, the voice of Judah, and bring him unto his people. Let his hands be sufficient for him, and be you a help to him from his enemies. It, it talks a lot about Judah and of Levi, that is the third in the list. Levi, he said, let your Thummim and your Urim be with your Holy One, whom you did prove at Massa, and with whom you did strive at the waters of Meribah. Massa and Meribah are the 2 points where they confronted God. They were unfaithful, and when God tested them, actually they have great issues and problems because of their rebellion and lack of trust with God. But here he applies to Levi as if Levi is the only person who has this difficulty. But whole Israel was a difficulty at these two places. But so that's where we see some of the things mentioned about a particular tribe seems to be applied for everybody because it looks like a collective singular. That's how the Israel is now viewed. And Tumim and Urim are two stones that are in the hands of a priest, high priest actually. And these two stones believed to be one is white and one is black. Again, Bible doesn't tell us exactly the white and black. And when there is a difficult situation and they want to make a decision, they want to consult God. And there is no time to wait for prophet to come back. So what they do is they will go to high priest and ask, tell us what is God's will. So he takes these black and white stones and put it into the bag or into his chest, and then he prays, and then he removes one of the stones. If it comes black, probably no. If it comes white, it is yes. I'm just paraphrasing. We don't know exactly how they decide with these two stones, Thummim and Urim. So when they believe that God has answered. Even David goes and uses this Thummim and Urim to go and fight against Philistines or not. So this is Thummim and Urim. This is for the priests, Aaron's sons only. But now this is shifted to Levi. Why? I don't know. So it's again, I'm more convinced that it is Whole Israel is viewed as a collective singular. Continuing, who said unto his father and to his mother, I have not seen him, neither did he acknowledge his brethren, nor knew his own children, for they have observed your word and kept your covenant. This is a very difficult verse to parse. Many people take it back to the golden calf incident, and 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 God judged the people who went into the golden calf, but who separated, doesn't even not bothered about his mother or father, and whoever have acknowledged and separated, God spared their lives. So that's what commentators think, but there's no absolute one opinion how what this verse speaks about. Verse 10, they shall teach Jacob your judgments and Israel your law, and they shall put incense before you and whole burnt sacrifice upon your altar. Now the Levites were given 12 cities, and some of them are cities of refuge. So uh, a manslaughter, when it is committed, the avenger of the deceased person will come and kill you. So if you are innocent, you can run to nearest city of refuge, which are owned and operated by Levites, and you can run as fast as you can before the avenger can catch you. Then you have a chance that your case can be heard. So the next day case would be heard, and if they think that it is an accidental manslaughter, they will let the the murderer, uh, person who killed, stay within that city until the high priest dies and he is spared and protected from avenger. Then he can come and join his family. But other than that, the Levites also would teach the law. That is their thing. So they will teach Jacob God's judgments and Israel your law. So that is prophesied by Moses, and which they fulfilled. But they shall put incense before you and whole burnt sacrifice upon your altar. They are barred from doing that. Only sons of Aaron, priests, are supposed to do. So how is Moses uh, talking about tribe of Levi? It's still difficult to make connections. So it's kind of a loose narrative, and maybe he's talking about uh, Aaron's sons, but applying to Levi because they are Levites. Because Aaron was a Levite, Moses was a Levite. So broadly, he's clubbing uh, Aaron's children, priests, among the uh, among the Levites. So we have to make several kind of guessworks here, and let's continue. Verse 11, bless Lord, his substance, the Levites, and accept the work of his hands. Smite through the loins of them that rise against him, and of them that hate him, that they rise not again. So they don't have land. Levites are not given inheritance. Have to live on the tithes provided by other tribes. But here, almost they have their own sustenance, and they were counted and treated as a separate tribe as if they had inheritance. Now we would shift to Benjamin. He said, the beloved of the Lord shall dwell in safety by him, and the Lord shall cover him all the day long, and he shall dwell between his shoulders. So maybe implying God's shoulders. We do not know the language, but the Benjamin tribe was became very pervert and sexually pervert, and they became pedophiles, and they also became all kinds of sexual perversions, and God has to decimate them. So all the tribes together come and make a war against the Benjamin. So very few people are left. So even though Moses wants and prophesies um, a grand career for them, perhaps they have grand career for many years, and then this tragic event occurs. So very few people from Benjamin are left, and they are absorbed into Judah, the southern Judah. And verse 13, he comes to Joseph. And of Joseph he said, Blessed of the Lord be his land, for the precious things of heaven, for the dew, and for the deep things couches beneath. So Joseph would have double blessings from above and from below. It's a more agricultural illusion. Rain in right quantities and right frequencies would come, and sun also, and then the crops and the land also be fertile, and everything is perfect for the grand agricultural crops and bounty harvest. So that's how Joseph is being blessed. And for the precious fruit brought forth by the sun, and for the precious things put forth by the moon, and for the chief things of the ancient mountains, and for the precious things of the lasting hills. We're still doing Joseph, and for the precious things of the earth and fullness thereof, and for the goodwill of him that dwelt in the bush. Him that dwelt in the bush, sometimes people would take us to the burning bush where God appeared to Moses. So perhaps it's referring back. Let the blessing come upon the head of Joseph, upon the top of the head of him that was separated from his brethren. He was separated from his brethren when he was sold away to Egypt, but his role and the blessings, the way God deals with him, is separated from the 11 brothers. Even as he saw dreams that his brothers, including his mother and father, would bow down to him. So he's done in a very special way from the beginning. Verse 17, his glory is like the firstling of his bullock, and his horns are like the horns of unicorns. With them he shall push people together to the ends of the earth, and they are the 10,000s of Ephraim, and they are thousands of Manasseh. So it kind of briefly mentions, but pretty much deals Joseph as one tribe, not as two tribes, at least in this narrative of Moses' blessing. Verse 18, and of Zebulun he said, Rejoice, Zebulun, in your going out, and Issachar in your tents. So Zebulun would be successful as going out of his land, perhaps conquest, and Issachar is blessed in his own tents, in his own place. So God might choose a different way to bless each of the people of God. Verse 19, and they shall call the people unto the mountain, and there they shall offer sacrifices of righteousness. For they shall suck the abundance of the sea. Seas is a metaphoric representation of the Gentiles over all the people. So they will suck the abundance of the seas and the treasures hid in the sand. And of Gad he said, Blessed be that enlarges Gad. He dwells as a lion and tears the arm with the crown of the head. So he's a ferocious fighting people. And and he provided the first part for himself, because there in a portion of the lawgiver. Now the lawgiver primarily is given to tribe of Judah. Now this is kind of being attached to Gad. I'm not quite sure why it is. Perhaps it is collective singular. And let me read this verse once again. And he provided the first part for himself, because there in a portion of the lawgiver was he seated. And he came with the heads of the people. He executed the justice of the Lord and his judgments with Israel. So he's kind of playing a lawgiver role, which was primarily given for Judah. And of Dan, he said, Dan is a lion's whelp, and he shall leap from Bashan. Bashan is a very fertile land, very prosperous. The trees and the animals of Bashan are they stand out compared to other areas. That's why we see the cedars of Bashan or the trees of Bashan. We also see oaks of Bashan. Sometimes we see strong bulls of Bashan. So the Bashan is a name for abundance and prosperity. And of Naphtali, he said, O Naphtali, satisfied with favor and full with blessings of the Lord, possess you the west and the south. So he's perhaps talking to them, talking about them as they would settle in the promised land, because that is the immediate context where all the tribes would finally settle down. So he's talking that in his mind when he was prophesying or blessing them to go out and possess the land. And of Asher, he said, let Asher be blessed with children. Let him be acceptable to his brethren. Let him dip his foot in oil. Dipping his foot in oil is again another picture of prosperity. Oil in abundance is an abundance of crops and abundance of blessings. So he would be very blessed and prosperous. Continuing, your shoes shall be iron and brass. So these are like strength. Iron, Roman Empire, brass is Greece. So iron and brass, like as your days, so shall your strength be. Even the verse is saying strength. And there is none like unto you, God of Jeshurun. So here, shifting back to Israel, God of Jeshurun, who rides upon the heaven in thy help, and he is in his excellency on the sky. So God in the skies above, in the heavens above, would bless all the tribes of Israel. Verse 27, the eternal God is your refuge, and underneath are the everlasting arms, ever protecting arms of God. You are so safe. The sword shall not pass through the promised land as long as they are faithful to the terms and conditions of the Sinai covenant. In other words, they should not go whoring after other gods and other idols and other pagan religions. They have to be separate and holy. And he shall thrust out the enemy from before you and shall say, destroy them. That's what God, how he protects Israel. Israel then shall dwell in safety alone. The fountain of Jacob shall be upon a land of corn and wine. Also his heavens shall drop down dew. His heavy figurative language of the abundance. But everything is in the realm of flesh and realm of physical. Verse 29, happy are you, O Israel, who is like unto you, O people saved by the Lord, the shield of your help, who is the sword of your excellency, and your enemies shall be found liars unto you, and you shall tread upon their high places. That's what God said in Deuteronomy. 10 of you would chase 1,000 and put to flight 10,000. As long as you are obedient to me, you shall be head and they shall be tail. But if you start messing up with the terms and conditions of the my covenant, then you become tail and your enemies would become the head. So those are the blessings of Moses. It completes and Moses dies and they cross Jordan and they come and settle in the promised land. So this is the general idea people give. So this is Jerusalem, you see. This is God dwelling with his people. They're all people of God. You are my people. I am your God. I dwell in the midst of it. So this is complete fruition of what is promised in Sinai mountain, what God promised them. And in fact, God promised not only to them, but their ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That promise was relayed or repronounced again several times to several people. And here the God's promise, God fulfilled by putting them in and distributing them in their allotted lands, allotted places. The whole story started with one man, Jacob, and with his 12 sons, and whose name was changed to Israel. And these 12 sons were fathered by Israel. So Israel fathered 12 sons. When you have 12 sons, again fathering 12 tribes. So the names of those uh, patriarchs were were given to the tribes. That's why you see Reuben, Asher, Manasseh, and Gad. All the tribal names are here. You can see the Simeon is here, Reuben, and then you have Manasseh, quite large area, Asher, Naphtali, Zebulun, and the land of Zebulun and Naphtali, it is Naphtali. This is called Galilee, where Christ would arrive. Those who are sitting in darkness, they saw great light. So this is the region where he would dwell, and he will often come to Jerusalem and to observe a feast or to expand a feast or to redefine a feast, and he goes back to this area. This is called Gentile area, and where Solomon gave uh, king of Tyre and Sidon permission for them to come and settle here. So you have lots of intermixture and lots of foreigners, and it's a very cosmopolitan Gentile area. That's why we see in scriptures Galilee of Gentiles. This is where Christ spent most of his time. So you have Benjamin and Judah, they're combined, and the whole thing, Ephraim, Dan, and Dan is in here. And you also have Dan in the north. It is divided. So this is the fulfillment of the Sinai covenant, and they are in the land flowing with milk and honey. There is abundance of crops and peace and prosperity, and sword will not pass through. And they have lots of additional blessings God pronounced. You have ores of iron and copper. You can scrub, and you have the for wines you have vineyards, and you have olive yards to produce olives as well as olive oil. So you have abundance of animals and agricultural blessings. It's basically essentially an agrarian society. They were nomadic, kind of nomadic when Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were not stationary, but here they are first time stationary. And here you can see what we saw in the camp of Israel. Camp of Israel, God was in the tabernacle as a pillar of cloud and pillar of fire by night. He extended his wings and extended his arms as if a canopy is spread and protecting the whole camp of Israel. We also see here their glory and their boasting and their strength and their protection comes from Jerusalem and from the presence of God in the temple. That makes them great, the greatest people compared to all the nations of the earth. A, a, a dozen of them will chase 1,000, and 10,000 will be put to flight. And God would supernaturally destroy their enemies. God would fight for them. God would sometimes put fear in their hearts of their enemies and terrorize them. Sometimes they don't need to fight. God would fight for them. That's what God promised. You don't need to kill everybody. You don't need to do the hard labor. Bit by bit, I will give it to you. Bit by bit, I will drive them out or kill them. You do your part, I will do bigger part. What a great, fantastic picture of possessing the land. They possessed the land, but they were told not to learn the ways of Canaanites and not to remember the ways of the Egyptians from where they came. So that is the challenge God gave them. As long as you are faithful to me, you will not fail because I am not going to fail. But if you go holding after other gods, I will loathe you and I will detest you because we see a great story of how God prevails. That's the Israel. Israel means God prevails. There is no partiality with this God. He punishes all the Gentile nations when their sins are full, when their cup is full, and he does exactly same for his own people, for his own covenanted people. He shows great favor, but he does not show favoritism. He's impartial in his judgment. He judges everyone. When you get time, go through first three chapters of Amos. That's a great three chapters. There is no partiality with God. He judges six Gentile nations and two Israelite nations. There is no favoritism, even though he shows favor for repentant and obedient people. But for rebellious people, I mean, that is shocking. First three chapters, he tells reasons why he punishes and judges a nations, how the nations rise and how the nations fall and perish and disappear from the map. He tells us reasons in Amos 3 chapters. So this is an awesome great God we see in the story of Israel. So by this time, after fast forward, after David, Solomon, and all the kings, now this is divided into two portions, and the northern Israel is first judged because they go more wicked, and southern Judah was delayed for quite some time, quite many years, and Judah is uh, also judged, and God breaks away his covenant relationship with both the houses. Let's see what happens to Israel, not northern 10 tribes. Sinai covenant, which began at Sinai, Mount Sinai, ends. Northern Israel, 10 tribes. Jeremiah 3, chapter 3, verse 8. And I saw when for all the causes whereby backsliding Israel committed adultery. They are committed adultery. This is spiritual adultery, going and whoring after other gods. I had put her away and given her a bill of divorce. Covenant is a type of marriage. When covenant is broken, God gave her the bill of divorcement. That means you are no longer my people. I am no longer your God, and I am no longer dwelling in the midst of you. The three rules of covenant formula comes to a screeching halt for northern Israel with this bill of divorcement. So they are no more God's people. It's no more Sinai covenant for them. Yet, even Judah is not righteous. Yet her treacherous sister, Judah, feared not, but went and played the harlot also. So pretty soon, things would come to Judah also, the judgment. Isaiah chapter 50, verse 1. Isaiah chapter 50, verse 1. This is what the Lord says. Where is your mother's divorce certificate by which I have divorced her? He is reminding them that I already divorced you, Israel. Or to which of my creditors did I sell you? Look, you are sold because of your sins, because of your rebellious acts. I divorced your mother. So the whole mother, the whole body of northern 10 tribes were given divorce, and their covenant is broken. Amos chapter 8, verse 1. Thus has the Lord God showed unto me, behold, a basket of summer fruit. And he said, Amos, what see you? And I said, a basket of summer fruit. Then said the Lord unto me, the end is come upon my people Israel. An end is come upon my people Israel. I will not again pass by them anymore. It's a tragic end for northern 10 tribes. Now we come to 12. Judah is still in the kind of, their covenant is not broken until Babylonians are ready to invade. So they have wide time period, several years, plenty of time to repent. They look to what happened to the northern Israel. They should have repented, but they went even more wicked than northern 10 tribes. But I want to present this diagram, the Jerusalem where God has put his name and his presence has 12 gates. So I gave the scriptures. I will send this diagram next email presentation. Just they have Valley Gate, Fountain Gate, Sheep Gate, Fish Gate, Old Gate, also known as First Gate, Dung Gate, Water Gate, Horse Gate, East Gate, Mifkard Gate, and Ephraim Gate, and Prison Gate. So it has 12 gates, uh, like 12 tribes, 12 gates. So this is Jerusalem. Let's quickly review what happens to Judah. And Ezekiel 11, verse 22, this is where we see God's presence leaves the temple. Now, Judah is losing its covenantal status. So, Ezekiel 11, verse 22, God first leaves the temple, comes to the Holy of Holies, comes outside the Holy of Holies. Then he comes to the threshold of the house, east entrance. And finally, he leaves the temple and leaves the city. And outside the city, on east side, he stands on the mountains, believed to be Mount of Olives, and that is the last time we hear or see about God's glory near Jerusalem. And he lives for good. He never comes back. His glory never comes back. Even though after Babylonian captivity, Nehemiah and Ezra would go back and they build the temple and they dedicate temple to God, we see no evidence of glory of God ever coming back to that, as he did when Solomon dedicated the temple. So the glory of God lives for good for Judah. That is a bad news for Judah. And Ezekiel 11, verse 22, then did the cherubim lift up their wings and the wheels beside them, and the glory of God of Israel was over above them. And the glory of the Lord went up from the midst of the city. In the context, this is Jerusalem city. From the middle of the city, it went out and stood upon the mountain which is on the east side of the city. So from there, God disappears. And the Jerusalem and Judah, now the covenant formula comes to a halt. You are my people. I am your God. I will dwell in the midst of you. God is not dwelling in the midst of them any longer. His glory has left the tabernacle, the temple, and the city of Jerusalem, and the whole Judah is now without God and without covenant relationship already. But the temple, the physical temple, physical structure, remained as a memorial, as a reminiscence of God once dwelled. Because later on, many years fast forward, Christ would come and teach on the temple. Even though there is no presence of God, he still uses it as a museum piece. Because once God dwelled it. And continuing Matthew 23, verse 37, this is another bad statement for Judah and Jerusalem. He makes this devastating statement and pronounces it as desolate. The word desolate means there is no God there. This is a vacuum. There is an empty place where God doesn't want to go near. So Matthew 23, verse 37, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you that kills the prophets and stones them which are sent unto you, how often would I have gathered your children together, even as a hen gathers her chickens under her wings, and you would not? Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. Desolate. It's the same thing what happened in the time of Jeremiah, Ezekiel, before the Babylonians' third invasion happened. God's glory left the city and the temple. At that time, is actually became desolate. Now he double pronounces it. Your house is left to you desolate. House of Judah, you're done. And technically, they were not given bill of divorcement as northern 10 tribes were given. They lose their covenant in a mysterious another sense. The covenant, when it is made between God and the people, for the covenant to end, one of the covenant parties have to die. That's what the sealing of covenant. When you seal the covenant by blood and you are taking an oath to honor and uphold the terms and conditions of a covenant that holds good forever until it has to be made void. It can be made void by bill of divorcement or one of the parties have to die. So here, the pre-incarnate word which entered into covenant with Sinai, he himself dies. He himself dies. In fact, the pre-incarnate word has come as incarnate word, and he was murdered by his wife, House of Judah. Judah kills her husband and brings the Sinai covenant to a permanent end. Permanent end. They destroy the covenant technically, legally, when they kill their husband, and they are no longer God's people, and God is no longer their God, and forget about God dwelling with them. So First Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 14, for you, plural, brethren, became followers of the churches of God which are in Judea are in Christ Jesus. For you also have suffered like things of your own countrymen, even as they have of the Jews. So he's talking about Jews, who both killed the Lord Jesus and their own prophets have persecuted us, and they please not God and are contrary to all men. This verse tells us they killed, Jews killed, Judah killed, and they ended their covenant. So this is a story of a great tragedy. It's a textbook for us to study and not to repeat those mistakes the Israel did collectively or as two independent houses. So this is the story of Israel. The journey starts from Egypt, and Moses comes and they delivers and go through Red Sea, and Stephen And other New Testament writers tell us when they passed through Red Sea, they were baptized into Moses under the cloud in the sea, and they come to Sinai and they are enter into covenant with Yahweh or their God, Moses being mediator, the whole house of Israel, and 40 years of wilderness. And they come into promised land, and then they're split into two houses as judgments. Assyrians carry them, Judah is carried by Babylon. They're back to the two houses of bondage, just like Egypt. It's a different house, but nevertheless, house of bondage. They started their journey, they ended their journey again back into slavery. What does that tell us? What does that tell us? Learn every lesson and heed every warning from the story of Israel. Don't repeat that. Don't go after other gods. Don't force yourself to be like other people. And don't rebel against holy, righteous God. Stay with Him and be with Him. Strive to be covenant faithfulness with Him. Adhere to the terms and conditions of the covenant and be His people, and let Him be your God, and let Him dwell in your midst. So, this is a story of both the houses of Israel going bad, and and next presentation we will consider the new house. Revelation 7, verse 4. I heard the number of them which were sealed. There were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of children of Israel. These 144,000 are standing in heaven on the Mount Sinai, along with Son of God in New Jerusalem. So they are yet from second house. We make a case for the second house for 144,000 because first house it is impossible to partake of the first resurrection. So that brings us to the end of the presentation. Thank you for your attention, and I will stop the presentation and open the room for your discussions and feedback.
Excellent study as usual. I really appreciate the time you put into this. I suspect this is probably the culmination of a lot of years of parsing through, the Bible, looking for tips and tricks and, teasing out meanings and tying things together. So I can appreciate that amount of time. And, obviously always make some observations, but the first thing I wanted to say is just thanks. Nice job. Um, Second thing is it's deeply appreciated. And as you were walking through this, I began to see that there were some interesting patterns. I hadn't really gone through the blessings of the tribes in Exodus 31 and Deuteronomy 33, but the order of the tribes is, you know, all over the place. And I'm not really following what that's supposed to portray, but I see a couple of things that are kind of interesting. First of all, Judah is, given a blessing that doesn't make much sense, but Levi seems pretty clear. It seems like they've come out as the judges. They have the Urim and the Thummim, and they are making justice and judgments, and they contend against the enemy, which is, I'm not sure if that's external or internal, but I also see that as judges, they might be equated to what we would call justice is blind. It makes a reference to not knowing father and mother, ignoring or not recognizing, brethren. And as a judge, you can't be, partial to family, etc. So that they have to adjudicate the law across the board equally. I think that's kind of what it says to me. Um, and the other one was Gad. Gad has an interesting blessing. It's quite extensive, and he is blessed who enlarges Gad dwells as a lion, tears the arm and the crown of his head. And I seem to remember something of that related to, and I don't recall where I've seen it, the separation or the separation from the crown, and that would be, England. And I'd have to go back and look at that a little bit deeper, but perhaps Gad is equated to, I thought at first, the lawkeeper, like, lawkeeper versus lawmaker or justice. But then I see a reflection in Gad for something like our Constitution. We have three forms of government: the legislature, the executive branch, and the judiciary. And I see all of those in Gad. I don't know why it's all in Gad, but those things were, you know, calling out to me in the context. And that was it for now. Thanks.
Thanks, Chris. Very interesting reading of that about justice. Uh, I like it because the material that we covered today in Deuteronomy 33 is so obscure. It's hard to interpret and hard to make a conclusion. Perhaps you're able to glean a little bit more. Appreciate your feedback. I'm done. So, also, if you don't agree with something that is presented today, we can also discuss that now or in future presentations before we wrap up this series. This is very news to some people. So I I touched perhaps many sensitive points where people are not comfortable, but I took risk and covered it anyways. I'm done.
Well, that's what a study is, right? You don't often get to draw direct conclusions right away. You layer it together, and pretty soon it becomes clearer. Um, so I appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you for being patient and giving some space for the presenter. Uh, so if you when you give some space and uh, some uh, patience to the presenter, so presenter would be given little bit chance to clarify and to build something. Uh, these things are they do not make sense right away. So next presentation, when I introduce the new Israel, the second house, it begins to make sense in the beginning, but it took me several years actually. I knew the verses and I procrastinated. I don't want to think about those verses. And then God would push me and wake me up and re-bring my attention back to those verses and finally forcing me to come to second house to come to grips with, because I grew up in the worldwide and all that I knew was only first house, nothing else. I have no clue that there is a second house. So this is like last 10 or 12 years when Rupa and me sat at home and started studying scriptures line by line, verse by verse. We combed through New Testament and then combing through the Old Testament scriptures. So we began to see which worldwide never touched this subject. And this is what I am sharing. And there's no malice uh, in me when I present this. I don't want to put down any people. I don't want to throw off any person from their pedestal. But I believe when once you comprehend the second house, perhaps you begin to see, not immediately, This is a great blessing. It's a great elevation. You begin to exist in the realm of spirit and realm of heaven in the presence of God. It's a great elevation, actually. So give me some leverage, some space, so that I would be able to present and complete this series. And thank you for understanding. I'm done.
You're muted.
I've just got a fast comment to Gore. I understand what you're saying as far as where you came from. Have had the same experience in that previous instructors get you so far, and then you have to go off and get other instructors and help to grow in that manner. It's no different than when you go through elementary, high school, and on into college, maybe some graduate work. Those are completely different teachers that teach you and give you more insight into what's going on and more detail. So this is no different in religion. It's how we have to learn. The good news is we're learning. So keep it up.
So I've got a couple comments too. It was good to hear you clarify in Deuteronomy 33:9, especially verse 9, because Tom and I were talking about it, trying to understand what it meant. So it was good to hear that it's just not clear. We just don't know. So that was interesting. And also your comment about Israelites had to overcome. They had to change the way that they were taught, being in slavery and learning all that way, and then learning God's way, even though they knew about other things before that. But learning all about the Sabbath again and all these things. So learning the new ways and how similar that is to us coming out of the pagan backgrounds and learning God's way and, all the physical things versus spiritual things. So it's interesting how many layers are there for us to learn. It clearly says, I'm giving you this so you can learn. But you've opened the door to pay attention to more detailed things about what is to be learned. So again, thank you.
Thank you both, Kerestes, Sis. Uh, uh, thank you for giving a listening ear to the presentation, and appreciate very much. Gailen, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Tigor. What detailed and very long explanation and teaching. So it's really for some people, like even for me, it's digesting all of it. There was so much information and detail. So thank you very much. There are some parts of in the future, or like I forgot which tribe had the ability to know the season. There was this tribe that is just roaming around because they remained, I think, shepherds or herders. So um each tribe does have a meaning to it. And then when you were talking about uh, Moses blessing the children, the 12, and one of them was like treasures in the sand. I'm going, okay, this might be oil. and and in my mind, okay, what else is there that is physical, but Moses was given that ability, I mean that prophecy. So we cannot even up to now we can see the hand of God through the prophecies of ancient thousands of years coming to pass. And it's really amazing how God has prepared everything for Israel and for us. It's so, I mean, thousands of years, even to the time of Adam and Eve, with the promise of the seed, which is Christ Himself. So, all throughout, the Lord has been faithful. The thing is, Israel and us have been unfaithful, but you said it right that we need to learn from this. And it is a book of life, of learning, and not to make the same mistakes. But uh, sadly, I think people want to make their own mistakes. Most of us. Anyway, there's rebellion in us. Or even with children, there's those who are really obedient from the start to just following what their parents say, and yet there's one or two black sheeps that they forge their way through and find out for themselves. So, but then there's still the blessing of the prodigal son, and coming back, and even better than the one that was left behind. So that's another thing of, you could also compare the Old Testament and the New Covenant. I mean, the Old Covenant and the New Covenant. I just suddenly that was possible. And even Israel being the son that left, that somebody told me that was her take on the prodigal son. So, any case, it's a huge topic you took up, and I'm still processing it. Thank you.
Thanks, Gailen. It's a huge topic, as you said. You're right. We can't do justice to this topic in couple of sessions. Since we are in 144,000, uh, I'm just barely touching, scratching the surface. And at some point in future, I want to bring more case studies between the two houses. The same scripts run, but in the realm of spirit, not in the realm of flesh. So the names are carried out, some of the behavioral patterns, some of the structure and the functioning. There are very similarities between shadow and reality. But the biggest difference when we come to second house is not in realm of flesh. It's in the realm of spirit. Even it's even more difficult to learn that realm because it is invisible and not tangible. It's a very abstract language is used. God communicates through abstract figures and pictures, shadows, types, and that's how he communicates the realm of spirit. So we should take time to understand and absorb and learn. And I hope you are there. And when we did the Luke presentation, last presentation, I introduced the realm of spirit a little bit, but we would revisit them uh, until several times until we learn it really. Peter said, repetition is not tiring to me, but it is beneficial for you. So repetition is best form of emphasis. So I will keep going forward. I will spend more time and energies on the realm of spirit as I repeat several times and redo the concepts. They seem to sit well. It took almost more than 10 years for Rupa and me to understand Not that we understood it already. It's all work in progress. But you take baby steps, as I mentioned on Tuesday. On Friday, we take baby steps and slowly we move away from realm of earth and realm of flesh, realm of physical. Slowly we move towards realm of heaven and realm of spirit, where God wants us to be. There is no doubt in my mind that God wants us to be in that realm, not here. So how do we make those changes? How do we transition ourselves into this brand new realm of which we have no idea, no clue? So that's where the Spirit of God helps us. We need to pray for ourselves collectively as a group as we are studying these things. And we really need God's help because the realm of spirit is very, very difficult. Difficult to teach, difficult to understand. It takes lots of time uh, to grasp it. Go ahead, Shalom Will. Not sure if it
Yeah,
Holland. Okay,
Scarlett.
Scarlett.
Thanks for the study, and actually it makes me want to go back through the, in Genesis 49 with Jacob's blessings that he gave to
Sure.
the tribes and compare. So that was, yeah, probably will be doing that. That's helpful. And just one small point, this is just a small point I noticed as I was taking notes through your study. You mentioned that the manna, that there was no other food permitted. And,
Correct.
but didn't they have sheep and goats and cattle? And, they did offerings, and they would also eat of those offerings as they were going through the land during those 40 years, were they not? And
No mention of offerings as much as I know, as much as I studied.
with the tabernacle, well, at any rate, where did you come up with that there was no other food actually permitted? I mean, they did eat the fowl that he sent. Of course, that was, he also punished them for that, but weren't there fruit trees? Weren't there, I guess I'm just trying to figure out where you, where you thought that it was not, that was the only thing permitted.
Yeah. The moment they land in promised land, you suddenly starts talking about festivals and bringing the first fruits. When you are in wilderness, there is no chance for first fruits. You are just eating manna. So no mention of any of the offerings. When they were at Sinai, they're still at around that mountain. Entire Exodus, entire Leviticus. You have consecration of priesthood, consecration of tabernacle, and then the sacrifices were there. So they were in the proper land. And once they move into wilderness, I don't see any mention. And they have to eat only manna, nothing else, until they demanded that they need some flesh. And then, the quail is sent. But that's an exception. There's a reason why they were fed only with manna. Because later on, Christ comes and says, I am the true manna. You have to exclusively eat me. If you eat me, you would live me. Because I am the true manna that gives life, eternal life. That manna was an example in the realm of flesh. That was shadow. But I'm bringing the reality, spiritual reality. I am the true manna, and you are in spiritual wilderness. If you carefully parse what he was teaching, and that's why some of these things God goes to great length to prove a point why they have to eat only manna. I know they were crying. We loathe this food, this manna. We hate this. They complained. How many years, year after year, you're eating only manna? Of course, it has all the nutrients that human body needs, and that is the best food for them in the wilderness, according to God. But according to them, not so. So the same with Christ's teachings. If I can go with the interpretation. So those are my thoughts. But what is your question, by the way? Did I hijack it?
No, no, that was fine. Yeah, interesting. Thanks for your thoughts. I will, I'll probably be looking into it more, but thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, I've got a tag on question following that. So the Israelites, when they're doing offerings through the 40 years, didn't they not eat the offerings, some of them? So you're eating the meat, the various meats.
We have more than dozen offerings in Leviticus. So some of them, they get a portion. For others, they don't get.
So when you
depending,
talk about eating only manna, you're talking about food that's available compared to, I mean, obviously you can't eliminate the offerings because they were eating that.
I believe this is again, this is my understanding, my interpretation. You can say my opinion. I don't mind if you call my worthless opinion, but I think they were not doing any offerings through 40 years. It's a special circumstance, special setting God has created for 40 years of learning just to walk in obedience, trusting Him with the harshest conditions. There are 130 in the daytime and about 32 or 30 in the nighttime. You have extremes in the wilderness, and you have scorpions and plenty of snakes in the desert, but none of them bit until they rebelled against God. So there's a lot more God is teaching through the wilderness journeys. And so the focus is not on uh, offerings and festivals, which again is a different setting, bringing in different lessons, the richness of lessons that festivals and offerings would bring in. But here, a setting of wilderness, this is a special case where you have nothing else to rely on except God. But once you come to proper land, you have something else also to you can depend. You begin to enjoy variety of food, and you're again dependent on land. You grow food and you bring first fruits and you bring your animals, and there is regular priests doing the work. But in wilderness, no mention of that actually. They dismantle and then they erect, and probably they might do a little bit of trimming of lamps and burning incense morning and evening. But while traveling, there is no tabernacle. Tabernacle is dismantled, and sometimes they travel several weeks, nights and the day. There's no sleeping. If you see how they can walk without sleeping, this is a supernatural, harshest conditions, harshest settings, but there's a supernatural uh, providence of God surrounding every way, all through mysteriously different ways. God is taking care of them. God is communicating as Himself to be a God that cares. and takes care of them in every aspect, every side, in every possible area. You see God protecting you in this harshest. You have different set of teachings that are dedicated for the wilderness journey, which we don't see when they are in the proper land. I mean,
So-
I'm saying more things than what you might have asked.
Yeah,
Why?
it gives different perspective on it, yeah. And I think I've read where they had not kept the Passover in the wilderness, which always puzzled me because I thought they were doing sacrifices all this time. So maybe that's what's going on there. And then going into the promised land, then they are doing all the sacrifices and offerings.
Immediately, immediately, God reminds them of the first fruits. You have to bring first fruits.
So I have one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
So basically, the tabernacle in the wilderness was for God. So that he was there amongst them.
That covenant formula is still there in the wilderness as well as in promised land. In the wilderness, they have to learn total and utter reliance on God. Total and utter reliance on God. There is no loose ends. They can't grab of some weed, some cactus and eat and survive. It's impossible. There are dangers everywhere. So you need God's protection more than any other time, and God's providence for your food and water more than at any time. It's total reliance and total trust in the harshest situation. We can talk more about this wilderness if you like. Uh, the lessons
just
are invaluable. Yeah.
Just one add-on on that. Everything could not have been unedible because the goats and the sheep, whatever they had for animals, had to eat something. They didn't eat manna.
Everybody manna. It's an interesting thing you mentioned. They're not eating grass. It's good for animals and good for Israelites. And their cattle is a support system. Cattle are a metaphor for teachers. When we come to New Testament, the support system, they do the labor. Cattle do the labor in the field for plowing and hard labor. So God gives some people to labor in studying His word and helping the brethren. Not that they're superior, they're not that they're above. Actually, they're below the brethren because they are in doing the labor and service just like cattle. But everybody has to eat that manna. Good one, I like it.